Welcome back to Liquid Lunch. It's me, Hugh, and Doug Force is joining me as, I guess, co-host for this segment. But we're very happy. We've actually been planning this for quite a while. We've got Jean-Paul Réaume here joining us. We did an interview a couple months ago
Sort of, yes.
on Skype.
Yep.
Skype, yeah.
From Quebec City, which is where you're living these days.
Yes, yes, from Quebec City. As a matter of fact, I was brand new on Skype when you...
Oh yeah? Well, it worked perfect. I mean, that was as good as any Skype interview we've ever done. But
I've never used that before.
but we're very happy to meet you in person and have you here. And we're going to talk about, well, actually, how should we introduce this, Doug, with Jean-Paul? Because of his work, his diligence, his research.
He's the one that brought Russell Roger Smith back from the dead in 1972 by getting the book.
Here, do you want to hold it up? I know you do.
Go for it.
It's sheer
By getting
accident.
the book,
By accident.
Ho Cannon,
Yes.
from the New York printers. This is one of the original 5 that he had printed off in 1972, and the other 4 he's given away, and now he has only this one left, and it's got the original jacket on it and everything. I'm sorry, Jean-Paul. Go ahead.
What appears very much with this book is like it looks like Smith's more or less testament or testament or
Yep.
and it's very concise of all the rest that he published, and mind you, it was before he left. He was in 65 and he died in 68. So therefore, when I put my hands on the book, I didn't know he was dead, but except I found it later on that it was a testament, and it started from way back when he got interested. Surprising, Smith was a mechanical engineer, and probably didn't work very much as such, but except he started in BC with the Native Sons of Canada, and later on progressed towards Ottawa, and that's where he met Walter Cool, who was a social credit member, was the Social Credit Party at the time. And
I'm going to stop you just for briefly, but he met Walter Cool in the 1940s.
around
In
30,
the late
40,
30s, the late 30s, 40s. But before that, in the 1920s, he was Mackenzie King. Remember with Mackenzie King and the Native Sons of Canada.
And that's where more or less he
1927.
pressed on Mackenzie King the idea of going to the Privy Council to more or less clarify the case of the colonies towards the dominions and all that. And as a matter of fact, that was the Privy Conference, the Privy Council conferences that brought the Statute of Westminster. He says mutatis mutandis, so therefore he must have drafted something. And he resumes in the book, and in further, his first tract was published in 1937. It was Alberta as a sovereign right to issue its own credit. It's a conference he gave to Premier Eberhard and his cabinet at the McDonald Hotel the 25th of October 1935. He published it in 37.
And that's when social credit was really at its peak, because there were so many people thinking about how to solve the economic problems of the Depression at the time, right?
His counsel was good because Eberhard issued his own money. It was a prosperity certificate at the time, and the reaction of the Canadian government was ultra vires, which meant you can't do that. And apparently, Eberhard went to Ottawa to talk the matter over. And as far as I'm concerned, I think he came back not so satisfied, but he removed his currency.
So who was Prime Minister in Ottawa at the time?
It could have been Meehan.
And Eberhard, was he a social credit?
It was social credit in
Premier
Alberta.
of Alberta,
Yeah.
okay.
So therefore, what the whole thing revolved around is get your money off the market, because you can't do that. And Smith had told him that he could do it. There's something somewhere that they didn't understand each other. They must have. There was plenty of information also in that tract that he published in 1937, pertaining to the agreements that were reached between Spain, France, and England about the Mexico, which related to the Civil War. How the old and the more or less the Lord and Chancellor of the was a trade, the Board of Trade wanted to grab back their plantations, and he states the meeting that took place. I was surprised, and it still is more or less.
So he's talking about the Civil War in this book.
That was a meeting between those European countries that were putting their nose in the Civil War. And as a matter of fact, they did.
The U.S. Civil War is what.
Right, because of course, obviously they want, the U.S., in a sense, they freed themselves from the monetary control of the, and that's what they were.
Well, they sort of, but except it's a federal union, it's a permanent union. You can't dislocate, you can't break that. What the British did, they built ships and put they built ships and put the southern flags on them. And they sent down the commerce of the U.S. at the bottom of the Atlantic. 212
Well,
ships.
the northern,
The northern, right?
because it was the War of Northern Aggression.
So the idea, he brings this up to clarify the matter, and at the same time he talks about the Canadian government. The certain things, and mind you, at that time the Governor General didn't have any papers, and how could he sign anything? That's where he found it. The whole system, how it works, unpublished, and that was the beginning also of Smith in the not so much in the publication of what he found. The rest was mostly talked about, conferences and all that, and that's later on he published to Canada.
But he did another book in 1939.
This one.
What was it called? I'm sorry?
Inside Canada.
Inside Canada.
Yeah.
And so that was the precursor to Ho Canada.
That was, yes it was. I think that was the, unless he had court cases from then on for
Well, he
income
did
tax.
pamphlets as well. This one here.
He published in French.
Yes.
And he published also another one in French.
Don't Shoot Me was this one? Was
Yeah,
it? Not
well, and what is interesting in a way,
yet. That was done in what, 1940?
for two,
42.
April 42. And this is 1939.
Okay, so before we really get into it, let's just talk about very briefly to give people an idea of what this book, Ho Canada, is all about. Like, can we summarize what it's all about and why it's so important?
It's a concise history of Canada,
Okay.
from nothing to, I would say, to invent anything that hasn't been done. More or less, he suggests that we make some kind of a federation by who can make it? England couldn't make it. Naturally, he goes on to say how it was made, why it was made. It was because he reveals that the Treaty of Washington, signed in 1871, 1871 in Washington. He states there it was signed, and that was to settle the Civil War, not the North and the South, Britain and the North.
Yeah, they had to pay 15 million for one thing. They had to pay 37 million for sinking these ships. Then the border, the 49th parallel, was finalized.
Wait, who was paying who?
The Brits were paying the Americans for sinking their ships
Really?
during the
Civil War.
The 37, was it 37 million or 32 million? And then another 15 million for something else.
In the South, and Southern Ontario.
Yeah.
Except the point was, the Americans wanted a payment from the British for having participated in the Civil War. And to do so, Britain wasn't fussy about doing it. And to compel Britain to sign, the Americans sent the Fenians in southern Ontario, and they made 15 million damages to the crops over there. And they went back to the United States. They went through Buffalo. And by going back, Britain understood that they had to more or less do something to settle what their participation in the Civil War, which was called the Alabama Claims.
I see.
So, in order to do the payment, and I think the Americans drafted the whole thing, retain Canada as a colony,
Yeah.
so we can cruise the St. Lawrence freely at perpetuity,
Right.
Article 26 of the treaty. And after that, the more or less, I think the intercolonial railway came in the picture, so as to lay tracks to move the material that wasn't going by sea, by water, could go on land. So that's why the intercolonial railway and the Grand Trunk Railway and the Great Northern Railway were American. They're still American.
Yeah.
CPR was mostly British
Yeah.
and had a bit of Canadians in them. And that's why there was a race to reach the West Coast.
Between Canada and the U.S. or between the different
Well, I said,
railroads?
The Canadian National Railway and the
the
Canadian,
National
Pacific.
turned out to
Oh, I
be,
see.
But the thing was, it's foreign, let's say, it's foreigners cruising our land. And I still think that in the St. Lawrence, their ships and their barges go in front of Quebec, and it's stated in the Article 8 of the Treaty of Washington, and we de-ice the St. Lawrence for their ships at our own expense.
And our own ships too, though, right?
Oh, okay,
Well,
but
yeah.
there's at our own expense.
So in the news today,
Right.
there was an article about a Canadian merchant vessel that was struck by an American warship in the St. Lawrence, just outside of Montreal. They had they
Possible.
And what happened?
It's
today.
It's when
Well,
they
no,
Oh.
I thought it was rather interesting, but it's
Interesting.
a U.S. warship that was in the St. Lawrence Seaway. That under the Treaty of Washington, they have free reign in our territorial waters.
Right.
That was part of the deal.
Yeah.
And
Smith wanted to put an end to that.
yes,
I can't blame him, and it's still going on.
yeah, that's why I say today is of all.
As it's, the whole thing rests upon the idea of the payment England paid to the United States for the damages is Canada. It's hard to believe, but
Well, but what, I mean, okay, so one thing, Seaway access is one thing, but what else did we sacrifice, or did they sacrifice on our behalf?
The San Juan Islands on the west coast and Point Roberts were part of that package deal.
Yeah.
and there's a river on the west coast
Yes.
also.
Oh, the Columbia River, right?
And Smith goes further and he says they like we call the brain work of the Canadians, it's shipped to the States. Why? Our population is 10 times less than theirs.
Yeah.
There's a reason for that. And I have a son in Chicago, and he said to me, he says, when I worked in Canada, I couldn't put any money aside.
Yeah.
But he said, in Chicago, I can.
Of course, right? But
I said, it's better paid and all that. And he tried coming back,
yeah.
stayed a year and went right back.
Uh-huh.
So strictly that, I mean, when the brain work of your citizens when they desert, it's you can't paddle fast enough. See,
Okay, so this is the price you're saying that we are still paying
Well, Averroero.
based on the Treaty of Washington,
Yeah.
1871.
It's
Well, and if you look at the Averroero, back in the 1950s and the 1960s,
Yeah.
we had a jet, a liner, an airliner,
Arrow.
that was so superior
Yeah.
to anything Boeing or Lockheed or anybody else was putting
Well,
out,
the airliner and the jet fighter.
and the jet fighter. And they were literally, the Americans called up the Canadian government, said, stop it.
Diefenbaker at the time.
Yeah.
And naturally, all the brain stuff that was on that project moved to the States.
Same with Nortel. Nortel was the leader in fiber optic communications here in Toronto. Nortel, the big, and with their cell phone, the BlackBerry.
Yeah.
Light years ahead of iPhone and Samsung and everybody else.
Yeah.
They broke
And
it up
now, that's right.
and
I
took the
see.
patents elsewhere.
And I still think we could go also on the material, communications, in the communications of internet and all that.
Well, that was Nortel with fiber optic telecom.
And,
But yeah, so that treaty is still coming and biting us on the bum.
yeah. And we seem to be, the trick that more I found through this thing was the Governor General, when he came in 1867 to govern Canada as a Dominion, it appeared to Canadians to be a federation or a confederation by throwing an election. People, when they vote, they're under the impression they're doing something for their own country, and that was a lovely trick to use. And yet the Governor General was a corporation soul who could make laws by himself or without the chamber or the House of Commons. See this?
Okay, so that's what's all in this book. Basically, this is an aspect of the history of the country that you won't hear anywhere else.
It's a resume, a very elaborate resume, but of it all.
Okay, so now, okay, Jean-Paul, now you found this by accident, right? And in fact, this book, you guys are saying has been suppressed, or?
Let him tell the story. Go for it.
It's surprising. I mean, after reading this tract, I decided it was too hot for me. I didn't believe it. So I gave somebody else, give me your appreciation. Fellow said to me, he says, if this guy pays a penny of income tax, he's a miserable liar. I said, all right, we'll check. So after what was said on the cover, inquired everywhere, odd answers, till I got to the Montreal Municipal Library, that they had copies of the author, of other books. Mm-hmm. I said, hold on, I'll be paying you a visit. I landed over there, and I ended up in a room where the books couldn't be taken out. Reading on the spot only. So the whole thing was on there. The fellow who gave me the books, he asked me, he said, what's in them books? I said, it's Canadian history with a political slant. Mm-hmm. Uh-huh. I said, well, you asked me that. He says, nobody ever asked for these books. Okay. Oh, Canada was on the table, so I couldn't read all the time out of the 3 hours that I had to be there and go back to work. I couldn't read them all. I said, hang on to them, I'll be back. So I came back, but the librarian wasn't there. Okay, the woman that was over showed me the books, put them all, and I kept on reading, and I ended up on the whole Canada. And after a while, she said to me, she says, somebody wants to see you. Right? Went to see him. That was my librarian of the first visit. He said, I inquired about what we saw the other day. He says, Smith's secretary, at the time he wrote this, was Jean Drapeau. He says, our actual mayor of Montreal. I said, that's why the French is so good in there, signed by an Anglo.
So Jean Drapeau was Russell Rogers Smith personal secretary?
I presume Drapeau was studying at the time. He was probably at university studying law.
But that's amazing,
well,
right?
I mean,
you got to work.
How come he latched on? I don't know. But anyhow, he tells me that. Okay. So, all right. That's on and on. And finally I got into Canada, where I find that, meanwhile though, naturally he said you can't take them out for a photocopy. So I realized I took the address of Canada in New York to order.
The publisher.
Publisher, you know. So the fact that they couldn't send me anything, they didn't know me, so I said, envelope, says, pay in advance. All right? I wanted to make sure that the books would come to me because I knew they were a bit hot. Mm-hmm. So I went to a librarian in Quebec City, and I asked the lovely lady that was there to order me the books. She opens up her big dictionary, looks up, she says, your book is not listed. It's out of print or something. I said, the publisher in New York tells me that he has the book, and I got to pay them in advance. She said, why don't you order yourself? I said, I want to use the services. How long does it take you to dédouaner,
get it through customs or
the
whatever?
custom, go through the custom? She says, roughly 20 days. Okay, 20 days, all right. I'll pay for that. So she orders and all that. After a while, when I'm home, My brother, who's recruiting officer for the RCAF at the time, sees mother, and he says the RCMP have asked him to supply the names of who we're working for, who we're married to, and who we're working for. And mother said, it's rather odd. I said, no, you're right, it's odd. So, anyhow, so through the newspapers, I see that the Elections Act in Ottawa comes in for a revision, to be revised. I said, in the Book of Canada, there's a chapter that deals with that. So I clued on, I says, my books right now are being stalled at the customs for some reason. Right away, I phoned up my cousin in the States. We've got parents everywhere, and in the States we have them. She says, I said to her, get your father-in-law to get me some books. Her father-in-law worked in New York. Get me 5 books. I'll pay you, and pay him and all that. I said, all right. So the books came, the 5 other books, and the 4 that I had, they came not quite at the same time. It took a while. And meanwhile, I said, this is where I latched on the idea of copying the books, digitizing them, because right now it's not listed anywhere. And mind you, after I got the 5 others, I tried to get some more because some people were interested in it, and I couldn't get any more. It was around 1972, 73. That was the point where I decided to copy them, because if I don't copy them, they're gone.
So somebody was trying to take them out of circulation.
Someone. I don't know.
And the Canadian military knew about it because they were asking,
The RCMP,
they wanted to know who
not
you
just
were.
not just the military, but the
Well, so
RCMP.
the RCMP
Yeah.
knew who I was and who they were.
Right.
And my brother, also being a recruiting officer, he didn't want the books himself. So I got on it, and I spent quite a time. The book didn't have an index. I made one in there. I learned my word processing at the same time. I was rather young, and I was rather green had done the whole thing. I never learned that in school, so it was the book on how do you do it. And the people that I showed a copy of the book, there was an historian in Quebec City by the name of Vaugeois. He was minister in the René Lévesque's government. I think he was in culture. I gave him a full copy of the book, opened that he'd clue on and do something with it. I didn't get any answer from the fellow. And I managed to have a copy sent to Parizeau, Premier Parizeau, and that I went through his sister or niece. And apparently she said to me, I asked, I said, did he get it? She said, yes, he got it. I never got a word from him either. And I said a few other things. Finally, all through that, we tried at work, myself with fellow workers, to establish a union, a railway union for our trades, because the rail unions the unions we were using are American unions. All are in Canada. It's all American union, and the fellow who deals our wages is paid by an American draft on a Canadian bank. So just imagine. I mean, it's so I wanted to correct that, and we took an appointment with. At the time, it was Louis Lebel. We were roughly an hour in his office, and after a while, he advised us to stay as we were.
So wait, who was he, Louis Lebel?
He was an attorney. He was a lawyer.
And you were speaking to him about getting a Canadian union
getting
going.
papers to form a union.
Okay.
And one of the guys, he saw his brother later on who was mixed up with the legal department. He said, did you send us on a bum steer with him? And he was told, he says, you had the best guy in Quebec City to advise you. Before we left, I said, would it be normal for an Italian citizen to belong to a French union, or say a UK citizen, a British citizen, to belong to a Spanish union. Didn't answer. So before we left, I left him my card on the table. We had been there for an hour, and I never did get the bill for that meeting, for that encounter.
What does
Probably
that
was
mean?
what-
What does that mean, that you didn't get the bill?
Well,
The meeting never took place.
I mean, he never compromised himself. So anyhow,
Okay.
I finally, when I had finished copying the book, and I put a footnote pertaining to that meeting we had, and I went to his office to give him and be a witness to what I had done, and he wasn't there. As the secretary was, I said, please give it, and I was told, it took me 10 years to find his name, because of the hour we were in his office, his name was never printed very far.
You're talking about
About O Canada.
Russell Rogers.
No, we weren't talking about Roger Smith. We were talking about getting papers, and I gave I finally got to know that he was a judge of the Cour d'appel appeal cases, and so that I put his name at the end of a footnote in Smith's book that I had copied. I wanted him to be conscious of what I was doing and find out. And a month after he got a copy of the book, he ended up at the Supreme Court.
Louis Lebel?
Lebel, the attorney for the union, and the attorney for, not the attorney, the judge for the appeal court in Quebec, after having a copy in his hands of O Canada, he ends up at the Supreme Court.
So what does that mean?
I think the guys up there know what's going on. There was a case in the meantime by attorney Bertrand pertaining to the Mirabel airport, that white elephant apparently. So Bertrand, who was attorney for those guys, he brought up the question whether Quebec could secede from Canada.
What, sorry, what could what?
Secede.
What? Okay.
So I picked up my computer and I wrote to Judge Lamaire. He was the chief judge of the Supreme Court. Sent him a letter. I said, before you render a decision on your bench, it would be nice to know what goes on, whether we can secede or not. The clerk at there said that the court won't hear any other cases for pertaining to the case. All right, that was a copy of O Canada I sent him. A month later, he resigned.
He resigned now.
He resigned. He took his pension. So, in other words, there must be something somewhere.
Okay, now, so this book is,
Ticklish.
it's ticklish. And what is the, thanks, Doug. What is the importance of this book to Canadians today?
To know our history, political history.
Our real history.
Which is false.
Our political history, but what about our constitutional or legal status and standing as a country?
No, Neil,
There's none.
we've got none. The chief of the opposition in the House of Lords, the 26th of February 1867, when the BNA Act was enacted,
Yeah.
on the second reading he said, Lord Campbell, he said, it'd be mighty hard to break the artificial unity we now propose to organize. The artificial unity we now propose to organize. In other
Mighty
words,
hard to break it.
in other words, it'd be mighty hard to break the artificial unity we now propose to organize. We live in more or less, in a supposedly confederation.
Yeah.
A confederation, you can't make that with TV interviews or elections. You got to make that with sovereign states. I mean, territorial. A confederation or a federation is a union of territories. It's not a union of opinions. It's a union It's not a union of fathers. It's not a union of languages. It's a union of territories. And to unite territories, you've got to own them.
So what's the issue, though? Who owns the territories?
The provinces.
So
The provinces own their territory from the more or less from the treaty, the Treaty of Versailles of 1763.
Statute of Westminster as well.
But it was prior to, after. But,
Oh, I see, yes.
because it says Article 109 of the BNA Act, which is an artificial union, it says that lands, mines, and minerals belonging to the several provinces before the union will continue to belong to the union after the union, the artificial union. So therefore, the land belongs to the provinces. And what the BNA Act did, in a way, more or less created the matter of territorial owners to more or less operate on their on territorial colonies that belong to England.
So under the British North American Act, on Section 109, during the Union, the actual land was owned by the Court and Chancery in Elodium. After the Union, it went back to the provinces in Elodium.
Okay.
And
But
that's-
they belonged to the provinces before the union. They went back to the provinces.
Well, they were under beneficial ownership. In other words, the provinces
No,
could use them
no.
under the Union.
No.
And then after the Union was broken under the Statute of Westminster, it was ended, they went back to having owner in fact, or
No.
or allodium title,
Now,
allodial title.
their capacity to contract union.
Correct. And that's why the British government ended the central legislature of the United Colony under the British North American Act. They ended that so Canada could actually federate or confederate. And that's what the provinces needed to do at that time, was hold a constitutional convention to create a federal authority. They didn't.
They've got to do it.
Well, they can't anymore. Now we have to seat de jure in each of the provinces, because it's gone too far after 1982. We could have, up until 1982, done what Smith had said with his interview with George Barr, the Attorney General of Canada. By the way, George Barr was the Attorney General of Canada, not just King's Counsel, when he did the interview with Russell Rogers Smith. He went there from Ottawa as the Attorney General of Canada to find out what has gone on. And if they hadn't have changed what they did in 1982, we could have done that up until 1982. Anyway, go ahead.
But that's up. Now it's provincials to do it.
We need to seat de jure in each of the provinces. The provinces are the sovereign nations. They need to seat de jure governments in order, and if they want to constitute a federal authority after that, then they would hold a constitutional convention to do that. But prior to that, no.
It's surprising some people know that we live in an artificial arrangement. When I put O Canada on the web, the webmaster who got it, he classified it under the Canada as a country without a constitution. He must have read it, because to print that on his website, and on top of that, he sent me an email. He says, "That's a delayed bomb you're sending me," and it's there.
So what is okay, so now what does this mean in terms of people who, and I guess people can they can look for and find a PDF version of this book. And this is what you typed out, JP?
No.
So this is your work in a sense.
But
'cause-
it's Smith's ideas,
right, but
that
you transcribed it,
edited it, yeah.
made it available
Yeah.
as an electronic document. So so we can all be grateful to you for that. But I mean, what does this book really mean in terms of people who are, I mean, who would be happy with what this book represents?
foreigners. I'm afraid foreigners.
Foreigners, why?
Why?
Yeah.
They wouldn't deal with Canada, or wouldn't listen to the songs Canada says about more or less doing things for them, or on the other hand, they could barge in because Canada opens the doors, and it's not on its own territory. It's on somebody else's land, And
In other words, the whole situation
it's
is a mess. It's unresolved, and it's like we're building this house on no foundation, right?
just about the size of it. And except if in a certain way, if the provinces were conscious enough to correct the matter, it's in their hands to correct the matter.
But okay, now you mentioned Eberhard, the former premier of
Attempted,
Alberta.
yeah.
He was doing something on his own, and yet he went to Ottawa and he came back and he stopped doing it.
The only thing Smith says, he was to advertise Premier Hepburn of Ontario at the time
Yeah.
to say, get him out of your territory. And he didn't.
Get who? Get Ottawa?
Get out of your territory.
Yeah, because what are they
And-
doing in Ontario?
Would have shifted it to Quebec probably. Quebec would have known any better.
Well, no, it would have gone to Queen Charlotte. The Queen Charlotte, I'm sorry, PEI and Charlottetown in the PEI. That's their registered domain.
So but anyway, there's Eberhard, who as a social credit premier, was trying to seriously deal with the Depression.
BC had a social credit government and never attempted to issue money because that's one of the prerogatives of a sovereign state,
Right.
to create courts, and issue money, adopt flags.
So, and of course we have, social credit was also strong in Quebec, and there was René Lévesque, who you would think, right, would with his separatist mandate, would be all over this information. What happened there?
We met his law department, Walter Cool and I, and we got out of there more or less beat.
Like but you would
The-
think
the-
they would welcome the information.
No, it doesn't mean anything. It gets in. It seems they were working on something else.
Is that because they're lawyers, or?
No, money.
It's all
There's
this,
money.
brother.
Money. Lawyers have money, no, but except aside money, aside money, there's socialism.
What do you mean socialism? What do you mean by that?
That's something else.
But seriously though, there was,
The point is to be independent. Who are we in Quebec? Who are we dependent of? The point is there, and nobody has ever answered that. It's sheer ignorance. That's all it is. And sovereignty, as far as I'm concerned, without ownership of land, you don't talk of sovereignty. It's just, I wouldn't say a dream.
but what you're saying is that it's already sovereign, every province.
Yeah, but except popular sovereignty is the vote of all the population.
Right.
That's
But you would
popular sovereignty, and eminent domain and land ownership. That's
But he's right, the provinces are all sovereign,
They
but
are.
they don't have a de jure government. The government that's in there today is de facto and non-sovereign, so they don't speak of the will of the people. The only government that can speak on the will of the people is a de jure government created by the will of the people for the will of the people. And that has not happened in any of the provinces or for the federal authority. As a matter of fact, the federal authority went in 1982 to get their maritime incorporation document, the Government of Canada, INC. They needed all 10 provinces to sign off on it in order for it to come into play. Today, it's still not come into play because Quebec has never signed off on it. If you read on the proclamation, right, it says
It's-
Section 23 must be agreed to by all provinces for this to take effect, and it has yet to take effect. The Charlottetown Accord failed to do that. The Meech Lake Accord failed to do that, and they just kind of, well, okay, we'll sweep it under the rug. We're not going to pay any attention to it. Quebec talks about leaving Canada. They never joined.
never join it.
They never signed.
The point is, from the start, people think Canada federated is a federation or a confederation. Right there, I mean, it's a misconception altogether. It's not, I mean, it's a union of colonies that has come to an end, but the colonials haven't.
It's a wonderful way to describe it. It is.
So
Colonials haven't.
so what are we to do with this knowledge today?
Spread the news if people can more or less accept or realize. And it's in many a way. We take our prime minister in Quebec. The first thing they know is say that it's competence of the federal. It's a certain jurisdiction that belongs to the federal government. Right there. I mean, a sovereign state has all the competence and all the jurisdictions. He lets them off to a central legislature, not the opposite way around.
It's like nobody wants to take responsibility.
It doesn't know it has responsibilities. It doesn't know, and it seems it's hard to get that in the minds of people.
Mm-hmm.
Take, for instance, if you were an insurance fellow at the disaster of Lac Mégantic, the whole thing would come in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
The first question the insurance man would say, on whose territory does it happen?
Mm-hmm.
It's on Quebec land.
Mm-hmm.
Then you turn around and say, when did Quebec authorize the guy who authorized this company to run on your territory? Never did. So the insurance guy turns around and says, Quebec pay. I don't have to pay a cent. But right now there's a whole system going on that the Canadian government will pay so much for the diversion of the railway, and on the whole end, probably the Canadian government will cover its ass with that, and the Quebec government would pay the other. It's just
Wasn't there, you were doing some research where that train derailed?
Yeah.
And you came across that nobody wanted to fix it because nobody would claim ownership of the land where it derailed on. And so the city said, well, we don't own the land, the railway company owns the land. The railway company said, no, we don't own the land, the Province owns the land. Province said, no, we don't own the land, the Federals own the land. And so
we have the same thing in Quebec City with the bridge. It needs paint. The province won't paint it because it's not its bridge. It's the Canadian government's bridge.
Mm-hmm.
The Canadian government turns around, all right, we nationalize it, we never paid it. It's Pittsburgh Steel who owns the bridge.
Mm.
So have fun with that. I mean, what do you do? The bridge is rusting and the paint is there and other guys to work at it, but it's not my bridge, it's somebody else's bridge. So it's mind you, I mean, Canadian-wise, it's a big micmac.
Okay, so this book is here. People could probably find it. They can Google it, Ho Canada by R. Rogers Smith.
or they can come to the mythiscanada.ca website
Really?
and email us, and we will send you a PDF copy.
Okay, there you go.
Or Inside Canada, or even the Alberta has the right to create its own currency.
All
Of
right.
all three of those.
And it's more or less, it's a very concise and complete history of Canada.
And you guys both have read it, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, what did it, what conclusions, JP, did you draw? And how did that affect the way you live your life?
I discovered mostly that Smith tried to emphasize on our minds that we're working for the Americans through the Canadian government.
In other words, the Canadian government is in reality a servant of U.S. interests. And therefore, so are we.
And the odd thing, I got out the debates in Parliament at the Commons when the war was declared in Europe in 1939 on the 3rd of September. And all the members of the government, the chief parties are there when Britain's at war, Canada's at war.
Mm-hmm.
They said the same thing in 1914.
Mm-hmm.
When Britain's at war, Canada's at war.
Mm-hmm.
Our soldiers went over there with British attire, British flag.
Well, even now, Harper changed the Navy back to the Royal Canadian Navy, right? Whatever that's all about. And we were there in Libya flying bombers missions, right?
NATO.
Under
yeah.
NATO. And
There's something else in the offing there. It's because the only thing there is, the USA is having us as a puppy dog, and we're docile. Even if we bark now and then, it's a puppy dog.
Well, and you can see in the western provinces, they were selling, the oil comes from Alberta, is sold into the United States under WTI, or West Texas Intermediary, and then they take it and they sell it on World Brent, which is anywhere from $8 to $10 a barrel more. So the Americans take the Canadian oil at a discount of up to $8 billion a year and turn around and flip it on the world stage, and they pick up and pocket the $8 billion that should have come into the Canadian company's coffers. In British Columbia, on the Columbia River in BC, there were the 4 dam sites they made in the late 1950s, throughout the 60s and early 70s, under the W.A.C. Bennett government over there, that signed a deal with the Americans that they would get electricity at a certain 3.5 cents per kilowatt hour in perpetuity, to the detriment of, if British Columbia needed the power, British Columbians would go in the dark to feed the Americans at that discounted rate in perpetuity. So the rate today is something like 28 cents a kilowatt hour, and they're still paying 3.5. No maintenance on the dams, that's all the taxpayers of British Columbia.
You know, the arrangements, the artificial union we're under offers that.
Yep.
This is a state of mind that everybody, naturally, with what would we use, popular sovereignty, you've got to ask everybody. Not everybody digests can suck that down.
well, it just makes me think though that, okay, so what, you could talk about the true legal status or what should be the legal situation, but the reality is, and this is, this idea of de facto versus de jure, I mean, who's got the guns and who's got the money carries the day. No?
It should not,
There's
but
a
it
few
does.
things. There's a few things that could be done, like the St. Lawrence Seaway,
Yeah.
and just, like Nasser did in the Suez Canal.
But look what happened there, right? In reality, the world can't really afford to have the Suez Canal shut down. And really, you got big American cities on the Great Lakes. Really, it should be open.
I have no
should it
problem.
not,
I
right?
have no problem sharing the St. Lawrence Seaway with the Americans.
Yeah.
And the Great Lakes with the Americans. I think that's wonderful because we share a common border.
Mm-hmm.
And we are brothers from different mothers.
Mm-hmm.
But we're still here in North America, and we should embrace that rather than compete with each other. We should embrace that we can work together. Now I'm talking NAFTA. Oh no! Oh my God! North American Union. No. Don't get me wrong in that respect. Is that we share the common border, and we should. But we need to be distinctive up here, as they are distinctive down there.
There was one thing that I thought of, would go over, that we could try, but it wouldn't be me to try that. If we're to form a kingdom, some are really hostile, but in the beginning it was wanted a kingdom, a Canada.
Yeah.
Who? You did?
Quebec Resolutions,
It was
72 Resolutions,
oh,
1864.
yeah. It wasn't there.
Yeah, it was the Kingdom of Canada bill that they took over. It wasn't the Quebec, it was the Kingdom of Canada bill. Okay?
Now, to play that game, mind you, I can understand your point, but except how to do it. Years ago, when I was with Social Credit, when the Social Credit was pumping air, I suggested to one of the guys that was with me at the table, I says, suppose we had Prince Charles. His mother won't walk out, tell him the spot. We could have him say, if he wants to, naturally, we can't force him. He has kids that could replace him. If we had Prince Charles, it would please to a certain amount of people, it wouldn't want to the other batch. But except we could have a compromise somehow. I think it could be more or less seen or proposed among ourselves, first of all, before we go to the implicated person. Because his mother, she doesn't want him on the throne.
But why do we need Prince Charles?
Well, we don't. That's the thing. And today,
Yeah.
in modern
Yeah.
parlance, the Kingdom of Canada probably would not have fly. Back in 1864, when
I
they
wouldn't
first
probably,
proposed it,
but except we never know.
you don't want to really be under a monarchy, my friend.
Why not? Why not? You tell him what to do.
I don't need to
Except
be
as
told
the
what
king of
to.
money, you tell him what he doesn't do it.
But I mean, is that illegal? We'd need Prince Charles to satisfy certain legal conditions, or could we pick anybody as
No,
king?
what he's suggesting is that we create a constitutional monarchy, a real constitutional monarchy, rather than the fake one that
The thing is-
that they're presenting today.
The damages England did to us, we grab one of our one of our hair, and say, you know the ropes inside there? I mean, now, apply it here and die here.
Hang them all and let God figure it out.
No, it would be a suggestion.
Okay, well, we don't have too much time here, guys, left, but I mean, let's come to some conclusions. I mean, what can we
Inform.
encourage people to do or to think about?
Inform themselves. Inform themselves, and at least broadcast what you find in there. The little things all mean something.
Well, and one of the things that we're doing at Mythos Canada, and I say to people, I don't preach, I teach. It's all about understanding the documentation and reading the documentation. That's why we've set up the website the way we have set it up, so that people can go on and read the historical documentation. Yes, it's long. Yes, it's difficult in some instances to read. But we are going to, we're going to have, remember we're doing the tutorials, so those will be ready in a couple of weeks. I know that Sean's still working on them and getting that going through the finalization of that. And they'll be available for people to help them with the heavier documentation.
For understanding this. So this is, I'm just going to continue that pitch so people can actually, and they could be watching this long after they're available, right? So they can go to the website, themythoscanada.ca, and they can order these tutorials.
Correct.
These are videos that are going to help them understand
British
all
North
this.
American Act, the Hudson's Bay Charter, the Washington Treaty, Statute of Westminster, the Canada Act, et cetera, et cetera.
You'll have all kinds of surprises.
Oh, all
Oh,
kinds.
definitely.
So there's stuff in there we haven't even touched on yet.
Well, and Russell Rogers was an interesting character from the Northwest Territory.
Yeah.
He was there before.
This was a surprising factor.
Saskatchewan
Coming
was
from Quebec,
born.
Saskatchewan. In Quebec and all that, and from then on, surprising.
Mm-hmm.
I know there's all kinds of information, mind you. He was taught by somebody over there that knew what was going on. And it's at the time, the railway, the link between the East Coast and the West Coast was railroad. And we haven't touched that yet.
What I just wanted to mention something. Of all the provinces today that have hooked up with the Mythos Canada and hooked up with us and what we're doing, Saskatchewan seems to be running at the forefront of holding a constitutional convention to seat a de jure government. Alberta is not very far behind. They're like maybe a half a pace behind Saskatchewan, but Saskatchewan they're getting the word out. They're starting constitutional committees.
He lived with them for a while.
Yeah, no, it's like-
this is the lovely part of it. He originates from Capel, and naturally, it's naturally material for him, for them. That's, mind you, in Quebec, it struck me, first of all, and to propagate the news. And mind you, I have just a small sense of history, and it just comes in, and it's lovely. And even my kids who are not interested in history, when sometimes I come up strictly with the history aspect, they say, nice, don't get into the other things, social credit.
Well, I would think that, I mean, even now, the social credit movement is still alive in Quebec. The, those missionaries with the white hats, right?
The béret blanc.
Yeah.
No, they're still going, but except, I mean, the main missionary, the lady that was there, I mean, she's gone. I want to pay them a visit to straighten them out a bit, but...
I went there, actually.
They're missionary, they're religious mostly.
But they're missionaries for social credit, essentially.
Oh, they are.
Right?
Yeah, no, it's their political philosophy is social credit.
Because they're still, I mean, up until a few years ago at least, they were delivering the
Oh,
paper all over Toronto.
Africa, mostly Africa right now. See, I said, go on other countries, and I think it'd be more responsive than.
Well, because people, and what's it going to take, guys? Because here we are, I mean, it's right here, the information is there, but it's, I mean, you're talking about subtraction in Saskatchewan, but I mean, where do we see people even interested in kind of
opening the book.
opening the book, and taking their political
View.
situation seriously and doing something about it?
Well, and the only thing we can do is continue, what we are doing is getting the information out. And you've been very gracious with us at the Myth is Canada by having us on Liquid Lunch a number of occasions. I think this is our 7th time we've been on Liquid Lunch. I go on other shows as well, and it's the whole idea of just getting the information out. And for every one person who talks to 2 other people about this, then talk to 2 other people, slowly we're going to reach a critical number where it will then take off. But we're at the very beginning of all of this. And so it takes time for that to come through society. For people, there needs to be a crisis. And there's a crisis coming. We can see that on the horizon in the financial world. And they're going to turn to leaders when that crisis arrives. And by us at the Myth is Canada getting this information out, hopefully we're going to create leaders within those communities that those people can actually then turn around and go, okay, wait a minute, there's something that we can actually do here that will save us all and our children's and children's grandchildren by taking this on properly.
You take, Eberhard could have said to the Canadian government, pay your rent, and I'll issue my money. Pay your rent.
But who had more guns,
Whoever got it.
right?
City of Ottawa. Right now, the Bank of Canada is urbanizing the city of Ottawa, and it doesn't appear at all.
And what?
Urbanizing, I mean,
Urbanizing.
upgrading the situation of the city.
Right.
Highways, throughways, buses, and everything, and urbanisation, they say in French. It's urban, when it's more or less developing
Yeah.
in payment for their rent.
Well, it's probably that Agenda 2030 as well, right? That international UN agenda to get everybody clustered into high-density
Okay,
areas.
but look across the river, how Gatineau is and looking. It used to be Hull.
Yeah.
Somebody said it's a dump.
Yeah. So they're fixing it up. Well,
Oh, Canadian government now and then raises a building, a museum, and some people are satisfied.
yeah. Well, Trudeau started all that, right? The first Trudeau.
And the last...
He'll be on the autos before too long.
It's funny, I think he's gone
sanctified.
in October.
This guy? Well, we'll find out. Well, guys, okay, so let's just give people a call to action so they can go to themithiscanada.com. They can order the learning materials. They can also support the making of the documentary, The Myth is Canada, right, Doug?
Exactly. We have a donation button on the upper right-hand corner. Now we also have swag. We have T-shirts, caps, ball caps, and stickers, both the large and the small. You can order those through donations, and in about 2, maybe 3 weeks, we should have the DVD box set tutorials ready to go. Fingers crossed. Also, I'm going to be in Ottawa on July 20th, speaking at the C3 conference on the Parliament Building's front lawn. Myself and the boys from The Myth, both Sean and the other gentleman, will be there with me, and we're going to have some fun. There are about 4,000 other people going to be there. There's a gentleman who's working to see if he can't get me to speak at the military conference the following day for about 25,000 people, but we're not booked on that one. The gentleman's still going through that process of talking to the people that have organized that, get me to speak there, but hopefully. So
great.
we're out there. We try to get out there as much as possible. I'm back on Duke Willis this Saturday. We're talking about central banking, the Central Bank of Canada, so forth, how that was created, and so I'll be doing that. Oh, so much.
Great.
But today, we had Jean-Paul Rahum come in from Quebec City. It was wonderful to finally meet the man.
Yeah. And Jean-Paul, I guess, thanks for all the work that you did to bring this to everybody's attention. And is there any, I don't know, do you want to give out any contact information or anything? Any final thoughts?
No, mind you, after 40 years at it, I mean, I would say slowing down, no. It's still,
Okay. All right. Well, I'm really looking forward to reading the book Ho Canada by Russell Roger Smith. So thank you for making it available to us all. Okay. So I think we'll wrap it up then, guys.
Wonderful. Thank
That's
you once
okay.
again. Thank you very much.
And thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll be back tomorrow for more right here on thatchannel.com. See you then.